live, yeah.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Op Show, where we bring trials and tribulations, automations, and collaborations from the world of DevOps and the developer experience. I'm your host, Tristan Pollock, with my co-host, CTO.ai co-founder and CEO, Kyle Campbell. And today we have one of our best episodes yet. Our guest is Ilya Brotzky, the CEO and co-founder of VanHack, one of Canada's leading HR tech startups, with a huge Slack community. I know you're a big Slack fan of like 150,000. How many people are in your Slack community now?
Well, not. Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me, guys. So 68,412. We started the Slack community it's a whole mess how we started. Like there was an email list and then a Slack community. Now we have the app. There's definitely not everyone on the Slack community that's in the app. So that's a whole challenge we can discuss. But yeah, 68K, and we try to keep it as active as possible with tech talent from around the world looking for new opportunities.
Tell us a little bit
awesome.
about VanHack in like the big picture.
Yeah.
Something like 150,000 people are part of the VanHack community, correct?
Yeah, we just hit 137K that signed up to the talent pool for the community. And it's all about connecting tech talent to international opportunities and helping employers hire software developers, DevOps engineers, tech professionals who are interested in new opportunities and kind of showing them this new talent pool that they otherwise wouldn't have considered, and removing all the friction, both on a remote as well as a relocation basis. So helping people actually cross borders and getting new visa statuses. So yeah, that's kind of the high level of what we do.
And the cool thing is we've actually hired someone from you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Danilo, yeah.
Danilo is one of our senior platform engineers. Actually, by the time this comes out, Danilo will have just today released one of our brand new features, which I guess I can talk about since this isn't live. He actually helped us build out our whole Slack home tab experience, which is going live on Monday, and we just submitted to the App Store. It was a great hire. We worked with him remotely from Brazil for a couple months while we got everything set up, and then with your guys' help, having him relocate here to Vancouver and join the team physically was great, really great.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, Danilo is definitely one of the favorites. One of the most charismatic people at the company. I love working with him. It's been a great fit. So thank you for that, Ilya. So how did you get into this realm originally? Like, what is your lead up to founding VanHack and like being this amazing community builder? Like, tell us a little bit about that, the come up story.
Yeah, for sure. So first off, that's great to hear about Danilo. So always so happy to hear what happens post hire and hopefully, especially when it goes well. With me, like I actually first memory of my life was immigrating from Soviet Union to Israel, 91, and then 93 I moved again when I was 5 to Vancouver. Grew up here and then immigrated again to the US in 2007. Spent 3 years there. 2010 moved to Brazil for 4 years. In 2014 came back here to Vancouver.
Wow. So this is like very much, you're very familiar with this, migratory pattern that people take. Did you move for work or?
Yeah, well, the first time was just, kind of looking for fleeing communism, for lack of a better word, or a way to put it. Looking for, we were actually the goal was to go to the US back in 91, because that's, I think, where most, people from the Soviet Union were going to. And then this, actually Israel, the first move was even just like, it was like supposed to be a move on the way to, it wasn't like, just like, you couldn't go directly to the US or Canada, you had to go through another entity. And back then there was no like internet or YouTube, you had really no idea what's going on. So I was pretty young, so I just remember like getting on the plane because my parents told me to. But the first time I kind of, in my adult life, moved was to go to university in the States in upstate New York, a city called Ithaca, and that was for school, like I was on a student visa. And then my first job out of university was for work. I got an international job at a mining company in Brazil. So it was a combination of quality of life reasons, school, and as well as work. So yeah, and then in 2014, the move back to Canada was also kind of because of work, because frankly, things didn't really work out the way I wanted to in Brazil, and I was looking to kind of restart my life, and I moved back to Vancouver, and that's kind of how VanHack started, because when I was coming back to Canada, a lot of the developers in Brazil, people like Danilo, asked me for help with job interview prep and just connection to employers. So that's how kind of VanHack started.
Yeah, that's great. So, and so you brought a lot of these, connections and communities that you had been through along your way, along your own travels, now to Vancouver.
Yeah, and it's not just about one specific city. I think right now we've kind of been, like, even the name is like, it's a van that moves developers, that moves hackers. It's not like the city of Vancouver. Especially
you were way the van life movement then.
yeah. Actually, that's been funny to see the last few. There's all these startup investors being like, yeah, we need to invest in these van startups. Like, it's awesome. We're nothing to do with that, but in a way, mobility, right?
Yep.
That feels like a press or like a marketing stunt opportunity. Like, head to South by Southwest with a van full of hackers. Have like a hackathon on the way.
Yes.
There was literally, I think on TechCrunch a couple of days ago, there was a venture-backed startup that's now is not just renting vans, but recreating trailer parks with like van parks that are kind of like hipster-esque.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah, there was a company called Van Life. I wonder if it's the same one that we were actually talking to. Their partners, which we also did. And I emailed them, and my email was like, "You're hiring a developer. Your name starts with Van, so does ours. We should talk." And then so we did a call, and she was really nice, the founder. But they ended up going with an agency, but it was a pretty cool conversation. I think it's a theme of my startup journey, is like all these things that I didn't mean to do. Like, I didn't really mean to create a community. In the beginning, it just kind of naturally happened because we start with education. That now are kind of paying like some form of dividends, where the fan thing is more just like a joke, kind of like, it's cool, it's the fad. But for example, the community aspect, like, or even I didn't even mean to start a recruiting company. I meant to start an online education company. So there's a lot of these kind of moments in the community building process that were, looking back, oh, that makes a lot of sense that we did it that way. But at the time, it wasn't like this grand scheme to have 68,000 people in the Slack community. I just thought we were going to do a hackathon in Slack, so I just invited people to Slack. That's really all it was.
I think I read somewhere, sometime around Slack's S1 filing, that you guys are like the second or third biggest, or maybe the first biggest free community in this. You got to go find that stat, because it was impressive. I mean,
I actually tried. I couldn't find the article again. I'd love to find.
I got to find that sometime and send it to you. I tried to. I can't remember, but there was an article about this somewhere.
I remember it actually. So, I mean, there's a lot of people kind of doing this now. I guess we were like the second largest at the time, but it's such like private data, right? Like, how do they? I mean, Slack knows this, right? But
yeah, well, I think it was included in the S1 filing, and the article was just noting that, where, because they're in S1 filing, you talk about different lines of business, and they sort of highlighted, there are some free communities. Here's the biggest, right? But clearly, it's not been a business venture for Slack to to monetize these free communities. In fact, I've asked them on a number of different occasions, like, are there plans that you can buy as a community? And they're like, no, it's free tier. Have at it. I mean, similar with our now growing Slack community, which is nowhere near the size of yours, but it's still well supported by Slack. So I think it's a great thing that what they're doing is to offer the product in such a way where you could grow a community that large, and they can get that much exposure to the benefits of Slack, international, especially around these international use cases, right?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Like, I actually would love a Slack like paid product, but I'm also very happy to like have this free version and have this amazing tool that I think is, it kind of went from Facebook group to Slack group pretty well. Like, I think they did a good job, better than WhatsApp and other kind of platforms like Slack right now, especially for people in tech. Is if you can do it right, I think it's really great. So yeah, I think that it's especially the international part. Like you have everyone in a Slack group, we're all kind of equal, right? Like it labels the playing field, where it's not like you have this advantage because you're in Silicon Valley or New York or Miami or Vancouver, or whatever. So yeah, actually that was one of our first advice that I used to give people. Like if you're looking for a job in, let's say, Calgary or Victoria or Toronto, like join the Toronto Dev Slack group and talk to people and like share your thoughts. And so I think there's a lot of people in the VanTech or Tech Van, one of those YYZ or YVR Dev like Slack group that are VanHackers that I was like, hey, just go there and look for a job. And I'm guessing some got hired. But yeah, it's really like I tell people to digitally be in a city before you're physically there, and then joining a Slack group with a bunch of people in your industry in that city is a very easy way to do that in an effective way. So.
Why do you think that's so important for devs, especially? I mean, I know that we did a webinar with your community where we were really trying to speak to our perspective about software development. Why do you think that's so important to your community and for developers especially?
Well, I think it gives them like I don't know if safe is the right word, but like a comfortable place to connect with people who are like-minded. Even if you like look at it like an in-person meetup. There's so many people that you maybe aren't comfortable just going up and talking to, but you are much more comfortable just sending them a quick DM on Slack or like talking to them in the Slack group about a specific subject or on a thread. So kind of like Reddit, I think, in that aspect. So I feel like specifically for devs, it really allows them to feel like they're in a comfortable environment or like familiar environment, because I think a lot of them use Slack for work as well. So there's kind of that. We have this in common. Like you don't see many, I don't know, this is a bad example, but like knitting groups in a Slack. It's mostly for tech-minded people, like founders, entrepreneurs, as mostly, and then software developers a lot as well. Very interchangeable. And I think now Slack's becoming like so global, right? It's like used all over the world, and it's such a like it's almost like it is replacing email. That's their goal, right? So it's kind of like done a very good job of being an international platform that way. So it's easy for you to connect with people from around the world in Slack.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I mean, it's definitely replacing email. I was talking today about how it's the first thing I look at in the morning, even before social media or email, to figure out how I'm going to connect with the most important people that I interface with and work with and collaborate with. I think one of the things that is so obvious about it, though, is like developers were doing this with IRC and open source for many, many years before that. And it's just such a natural place to be able to go and consume information, without having to stand on the soapbox and put yourself in that awkward social situation. And I remember when I was first getting into software development, there was a huge amount of imposter syndrome for me, right? And every new community I go into, there was a new level, a different kind of a nuanced imposter syndrome. So being able to join on Freenode, I remember, like this community, and just listen to what people are talking about, whether it's Node or it's JavaScript or it's, technology specific communities, just let me understand what the temperature of the room was and what other people were trying to learn about before I jumped in and said something foolish, not knowing what I didn't know. Right.
Yeah, though, that's a really good point. And I think like a lot of people in our Slack community are, in that mode for most of the time, right? The ratio of people who contribute and ask questions and kind of publicly speak versus those listening and watching is kind of probably 1-100, 1-50, and it's great. And I think that it's a great way for us to kind of share our message, share jobs, share success stories, with a large amount of people, and then they can quickly, just in a few clicks, get involved, like opt into that opportunity if they want, or just learn more. So yeah, I think it's like you hit on the head with the IRC, like how it's been something people have been like they're used to it, so it's familiar and it's easy, and that helps spread.
Yeah, in the case where people are relocating across the world, right? What I've found is the hard skills are universal. The person understands the technologies. These are not typically the challenges that they're facing, right? What they're trying to figure out is, I'm moving to a whole different place with a different culture, different social dynamic, different emphasis, right? And so that's what I like about how you guys are using Slack and where you're coaching them, because they're absorbing all of those other skill sets that are going to help them be incredibly job effective as they come into that very different locality in their career, right?
Yeah, definitely. We actually made a success case video today of a developer from India. She moved in February to Vancouver and was talking about how the hardest part for her wasn't the technical part, it was the cultural part, because it's so different from Asia to North America. And how with VanHack, like I mentioned, we just started as a school, and education and mentorship is a huge part of what we do. It's all about giving value first, whether that's with like free content or with very modestly paid content. We try and over deliver there. And then, therefore, we built this, community that's engaged and active and excited to kind of give them powers that they didn't know they could achieve, or maybe like they didn't know how to achieve. And that really has been, again, looking back, I think one of the main reasons we succeeded. Like, you don't really talk about Randstad or Adecco or Robert Half and say like, oh, that's a Robert Halfer who got hired, or Adecco, or they don't have this, like, versus like I don't know what kind of Airbnb, or I guess not.
Googler.
Like, so someone who's like part of like
Googler is one of them.
Googler.
Yeah.
Googler. There you go.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. There's this pride associated with being part of the group. It makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys do so much to help the individuals. I mean, what are some of the things that you share with companies? You and I talked a lot about this in preparation for hiring Danilo. What do I need to be thinking about? How do I get myself out of that typical local hiring frame and prepare for, the commitment that somebody like Danilo was making to move across the country?
Definitely. We try and make it as possible, because I think a lot of times companies see it as this gargantuan, bureaucratic, impossible task of, oh my gosh, I'm going to hire someone from abroad, red flag, visa, red flag, potentially on subconscious bias about ethnicity or race or gender, or English accent level to a point, etc. Payments, there's so many of these kind of even mental hurdles founders and companies have. I should say we work actually a lot with HR, so definitely HR as well have, and so we try and remove all the friction there by showing them, like, we created a guide to the global talent stream visa, which is, just Canada speaking. It's like the H-1B of Canada for our American friends. And it works well. You basically just need a job offer and you can move to Canada, which is what Danilo did. We have like a 4-part guide, which in my opinion is, other than the Government of Canada website, it's like takes the Government of Canada website and puts it into digestible chunks. It makes like little videos and shows exactly how to fill in forms. And, we also do consultation calls and manual stuff too, but like, we do a lot on that side of things. That's been a large one. Also remote work. Like, we've been, I guess, I don't know, again, another thing that I didn't mean to create back in the day, that we've been remote work for 5 years, like remote work team for 5 years. That's not on purpose. It's just because I frankly couldn't afford to hire a full-time staff member. So the person worked part-time while I was the only full-time employee of the company. So things like that, right? And now it's been 5 years, and we're not perfect. There's definitely like, all those remote companies that are famous are better than us at it, but that's something that we now teach to our employers, because a lot of them now have to hire remotely for the first time, or like in your case where you hired Dino for, I think, 3 months remotely, and then you did the visa process. There's all these kind of little hacks, for lack of a better word, that we like to share with our customers as well as the world. Like, I would love, like, actually, I love it when companies come to me and be like, I watched your videos, I like read some of your blog posts, and then I was able to go through the visa process on my own with a candidate that I found on my own or whatever. And like, thank you so much for creating that. And, government websites, visa process websites, and government forms for immigration are so poorly created. And like, no offense, government, but like they need to hire some UX designers, right? So
it's been long overdue.
Yeah. It's like all from the 60s. It's all PDFs, and you can't like save it. You have to fill it all in. Don't get me started. So we try and take that burden off of companies, but mostly it's like just changing mindset, just being like, you know what, you're not limited to people in your postal code or in your area code. You're not limited to, or zip code. You're not limited to people in your state or your province or even your country. Like, especially with tech, like, it's so universal, as you said, that there's great DevOps engineers who work with AWS, Azure, whatever, GCP, anywhere in the world. And typically, like if you look at Stack Overflow, like the top 100 people with the reputation score, like they're usually like they're from like 70 countries. Like it's so diverse. It's not like this one country has a monopoly on software talent. So yeah, that kind of preaching that gospel has really been the biggest thing that I feel like we need to do, because we still run into companies that are like, oh my God, visas are hard, or you know, frankly, I've had companies tell me, hey, I don't want to hire people from a specific country because I don't think that they're as good as others. And it's kind of like, that's kind of racist, you know? So we try and lightly, and sometimes more, you know, lightly say, you know what, you should just think about like opening up your scope to the widest possible lens, because then you'll have the highest possible chance to find the perfect fit. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. And then the ones who do that are going to win. Companies like Fair, which is a huge, fastest growing unicorn, Applyboard, two huge unicorns from Waterloo, raised hundreds of millions, like over $100 million each from U.S. investors in Kitchener Waterloo. They both hired from us, and they have this global mindset. Companies like that, they get it and they move fast, whereas you see other companies that are maybe a little bit slower, of course won't name any, and still be like, oh, I want to hire someone who's just like me, who's a cultural fit, who can, you're competing with the FANG companies, right? Like, come on, man. Like, sometimes I feel like shaking people.
Yeah.
but yeah, anyway, that's kind of what we do for the company side, and it's something that I think is going to grow and evolve over time as we, especially now, shift more and more to remote, more and more to employ anywhere, work anywhere. We just announced a partnership with a company called Dino, which is a Andreessen Horowitz startup that does global payments and compliance for contractors. So stuff like that, we're really trying to build in the arsenal of like, you kind of come to VanHack and you can quickly employ the right person and figure out, don't worry about all the other bureaucratic stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time right now as well. It's like, I think you've been almost seeing Canada poach talent and tech talent from the United States. And I think that was probably something not as easy to do, I don't know, in the previous years. Have you been seeing a higher influx of people choosing Canada over the US with some of the visa changes in the US, or?
Kind of. Not as much. I think the media is making it too big of a deal of it, honestly. Not like the Canadian visa immigration process is perfect, and right now it's stalled. A lot of people don't really know that. Like, they haven't approved a work permit in like 4 months because of COVID.
Really?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So I don't feel like it's so much Canada is like way better than the US in this sense. I feel like US has this huge advantage, which is the American dollar and salaries just being twice, basically. When you look at things like quality of life, cost of living, of course, we have to pay health insurance, etc. It's always a calculation, but there's plenty of, US companies hiring remotely. There's even startups that the whole job is to help US companies hire people in Canada and pay them slightly lower than US wages, but much higher than Canadian wages, and basically like poach Canadians, but to US companies, even digitally, remotely. And I think like there's a lot of people on H-1Bs right now who are happy to stay where they are. People who didn't get their H-1B approved because of suspension a few weeks ago, they're just going to keep working remotely for their employer. And maybe a small amount of them are thinking about Canada. But hey, who knows? Maybe if we're sitting in 6 months from now and COVID is at how many, like, it just keeps going the way it is going in the US, and Canada's relatively low, then maybe a lot of people start seriously considering coming up here, and maybe as kind of a health reasons. But right now, financially speaking, if you're an engineer in even Austin or Miami, kind of secondary American markets, you're making way more than your counterparts in Canada. And if you're a Canadian engineer, you just work remotely for a US company and keep living in Canada. So I'm not really seeing that much people running to Canada right now.
With the stall and sort of
from
like
the US. Sorry to interrupt you.
From the US. Yeah. And a lot of the hiring that you're doing is more international. I know you do a lot in Brazil. Where else?
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge world out there. So all those kind of usual suspects: India, Pakistan, Russia, Ukraine. We've seen a lot in like Nigeria and Ghana. Like Africa is huge. Colombia, Argentina, Venezuela. But we've helped people from Belgium move to Canada, people from Malawi move to also Canada, people move to Malta from like Nigeria. Like it's a very kind of mix and match, and I think that we're trying to become more diverse and not just kind of focus on one quarter. But yeah, like there's all these kind of countries or cities or even countries out there. Malta is actually a good example or even the Netherlands actually is a better example, where they're really investing a lot of money and time as to attracting skilled immigrants and creating better visa programs, frankly, than we have in Canada, that give like tax incentives to skilled workers or software engineers to move and work in the Netherlands. 30%, you pay 30% less tax for the first 8 years that you live there, for example, there. And they're like, the city of Amsterdam has this event called Project A. They go out and like try and recruit, and Finland has this, and I think a lot of Northern European countries are starting to work on this model, where you're starting to see talent considering these places because it's a great location to live. You get good healthcare, education, tax incentives, and it's going to be, or already is, a global kind of war by governments to, maybe war is a bad word, competition to attract the best tech talent as possible, and not have them work remotely and basically outsource the job, but have that dollar and also the spending power stay in their local communities.
And then COVID hit, and now everything went remote, and so what do you see with your community with this this push to now I can work anywhere, and how does that look for opportunities, and how much do you think is going to reset once things cool down next year at some point?
I'm seeing an increased demand and want to relocate. I'm seeing people, because even though they can work remotely in their home country, but because of COVID and look at India and Brazil, for example, to the top, I think 10, or Brazil second for sure. I'm not sure India where they're at, but high case counts in both countries and high growth rate. Those people there want to leave even more. And now what we're seeing is companies start people working remotely, getting to know them, kind of frankly following your model, the model you guys did, and then having that person relocate and keep working remotely, which is I think what Dino is still doing right now, right? So he's in Vancouver, and he's still working. He's working remotely. So I think the remote, relocate, remote model. I don't have a good word for it because it's like 3 words or 1 word twice, right? That type of hiring is now, I feel, going to be like a huge weapon that startups can use to say, hey, like, you might be a Salesforce engineer in India and working like really like strong employer, strong company, but we're going to offer you this opportunity to come to the Netherlands, Germany, Portugal, Canada, and that might be the tipping point or the kind of selling point that gets the candidate to say, you know what, I'm going to leave this large company that like secure and maybe take a risk, if that's the right word, because honestly, it's not that big of a risk. You can always go back to a large company and work for this startup. And so if you're a startup, I think it's a really exciting time for you because you can hire, if you're open to this kind of way of working, you can hire much better talent at a better rate, move faster, etc.
Do you think that this becomes a much more dynamic opportunity? I mean, obviously you said some of the hiring or immigration is stalled out here in Canada. You're clearly evaluating these other opportunities about what it looks like on the global landscape. But do you think the next scenario is more dynamic in how companies cater to these hires from the perspective of, hey, well, I know that there's this talent pool, these 10 people from around the world who are all interested in perhaps relocating there, and we don't even have an office. So perhaps we can set up a virtual environment, a virtual office for them to relocate there. They're not necessarily working out of the same office, but at least they still can benefit from FaceTime, social interaction, drive that cohesion that makes a team strong to get. Like, do you see it keep decoupling to that point where companies will even start hiring cross-border in places where they don't necessarily have a physical presence?
Yeah, I mean, that's what this partner company of ours, Deal, does. There's a few other companies doing similar things. This kind of employer of record type market that's starting to grow right now because exactly this is companies, they frankly don't really care where the person is, and if they can facilitate the problem is the immigration piece. It's like you have to choose a country that's open to you bringing in talent where you don't necessarily have an office. But I think usually the way these markets work or these models work is a government will allow you to bring in foreigners if you also hire locals. So if you can kind of combine, if you want to set up an Amsterdam or a Dutch office for CTO.ai, you guys can just hire a few Dutch or citizens for customer service or sales or whatever, and then bring in developers to live in the Netherlands as well. In this case, so I think as long as companies are willing to do that, then great. But yeah, I think it's going to be super decoupled. Like opportunity and location or geography are just no longer connected at all. At least for many companies, like look at Shopify, right? Yeah. Twitter, I think as well, etc. So like, yeah, it's going to be something that just keeps going further out. Like I think borders shouldn't matter in terms of like hiring and recruiting, but I think countries can start really using this as a place. Like for example, Estonia, they created the digital nomad visa, where they basically are using this visa to attract people to like open up bank accounts and have Estonian ID numbers and pay taxes in Estonia. But those people can live anywhere in the EU for a year. So it's like this really cool kind of not even a visa to Estonia, you get a visa to a whole continent, pretty much. So yeah, this I think also they have the digital citizenship. Kristen. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, digital nomad visa, exactly this. And they have the e-resident program. I quite frankly think Canada should have an e-resident program. I think multiple countries should have e-residence program, and then we can all have e-residence. I'm an Estonian e-resident, for example. It costs $100 and stuff like that. It was pretty easy to fill out. It doesn't really do anything, but it could have allowed me to open up a company in Estonia. And for example, if I could be a digital resident of Malta, of Singapore, of the United States, and of Canada, then all of a sudden I have like 10 nationalities that I can choose from and use to as I see fit. And I think that's super powerful. And I think. Yeah, that's a trend that I think maybe in 3 to 5 years will be there, but it's just starting now.
Wow.
And how does that work out? Like, let's say, what's the benefit for the home country by opening up their, residency or
tax revenue?
Yeah.
Or even just having someone live there, right? Like every skilled worker that moves to a new country, or even like it creates, I think, 6 or 5 jobs for other people. This according to Enrico Moretti, is like an economist from Cal University or University of California, Berkeley. He talks about how like people, it's kind of, you don't even like, it's very simple. Like if I'm living in, let's say, Berlin today, I'm going to be buying food at the grocery store in Berlin. I'm going to be going to the movie theater in Berlin. My rent will be paid in Berlin, and my car will be bought in Berlin, and my kids will go to school in Berlin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And think about all the money. Let's say I'm going to make 100K euros. That's, a large salary, but like, let's say I'm making that money as a software engineer. I'm going to spend 30% of that on taxes. So German government, local government, and then I'm going to spend, let's say, the other 70%, half of that or 2/3 of that on living expenses. Yeah. And that's going to create jobs for waiters and, hairdressers and all people, clothing, whatever. So that I think is, maybe what happens is you don't even have to live in that city. And then because you're getting these benefits of being a citizen of that country, you're going to have to pay a little bit of your tax dollars to that government. And then it's kind of like the Luxembourg model, where you have such a small cost base because it's such a small country of only 500,000 people. So their healthcare and road and education costs are so low, but they attract so many, and they attract companies by offering a low tax rate. So you can become more competitive. Ireland, the same thing.
Singapore.
You can become more competitive that way.
Yeah, which is in great contrast to how the U.S. operates, where the U.S. has a sort of like a worldwide taxable income policy. So no matter where you live, even if you still have a citizenship, you're still paying some degree of tax back because they have such a high cost center of But I mean, governments are over business. That's kind of what it comes down to. They got to generate a profit for their constituents, just like any company has to. I mean, governments are essentially corporations for all intents and purposes, just with different founding documents, right?
Yeah, you'll exactly right. If you don't do it that way, you'll end up like the Soviet Union.
Right.
So I think they defaulted on some debt and kind of aren't around anymore. So I completely agree with that. One thing about the U.S. That what you said about it, that's actually I think the Facebook co-founder Eduardo Saverin he denounced his U.S. like very publicly denounced his citizenship because of this because he didn't want to pay taxes on his earnings and he went to Singapore because actually I think Brazilian, right? Yep. So he became a U.S. citizen because of like living there for a while and going to school there. So yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic and yeah, I think it's something that hopefully will be more and more important because people start realizing the power of it, right? Like right now, I had a call yesterday with a guy who's a dual Canadian citizen. You know, he could easily come to Canada from he's an SF, so he can come to Canada. So the value of his Canadian citizenship is like so much higher maybe this time now than it was last year because the COVID cases are so much lower in Canada. Yeah. And it's not just COVID, but like other things like that, right? Whether that's favorable tax policies like SHRED and things like that, or not being taxed anywhere you live, etc.
Or universal basic income experiments that are running now, and
yeah. Although I mean that wouldn't make me personally want to move to a specific city, but you know I think there are a lot of people that would want to move to. For example, if a state in the U.S. like if Alabama all of a sudden had a UBI, I think a lot of people would move to Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, what's great with this is like there's this huge shift towards optionality, and anytime there's options, you know, you create opportunity. I think that's kind of like the root of the word. That's what it means. So, you know, as horrible as it is what's going on in the world, it is creating, you know, I always say that creativity comes from constraint. With these situations happening, all of these new opportunities start emerging, and people suddenly have these incredible options. I just hope it gets back to a place where, you know, it's much easier to take advantage of them, right? Whether it's going to the Netherlands or it's, you know, coming from Brazil to Canada, we got to get, you know, hopefully the world opens back up for business in that regard. And all of these things now, you know, continue to be the norm, the mainstream, right?
Exactly. I think that's kind of the next logical step is things are slowly opening up. We've had, I think, 5 or 6 people relocate. Just had a guy from Pakistan move to Ireland a couple weeks ago. It is, you know, there are still relocations happening. But once kind of things settle down or whatever, adjust, then you're absolutely right. Like, I think there'll be more immigration than there ever was before. And I think the more people would move into like smaller cities or like suburbs or being more spread out. And I think a country like Canada is really greatly positioned for that because we have so much space.
Yeah.
I hope, for example, the US creates a similar program to Global Talent Stream and reforms H-1B after, you know, sometime next year. No matter who gets elected, I think that'll be a positive for the American taxpayer.
Yeah, it's a good economic decision on either side, regardless of which way you look at it. I mean, it's a way to generate, you know, significant wealth, you know, and perpetuate America's strength in technology, and it's just also a very, you know, good cultural thing. It's inclusive, and you know, I could not see any arguments against it personally.
Well, I know you got to run, Ilya, so it was a pleasure. One last question, you know, what's your favorite Slack app?
the VanHack app coming soon. For now, I'll say, you know, probably my favorite one is, I think Zoom is a really boring answer, but I really like Zoom as an app just on Slack to be able to quickly like jump on a call with someone, have that conversation. I think like 5 years ago, it was so hard to like, there was the, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Like Skype and other products weren't so good, but Zoom really changed things. I think it's so easy to start. We do our weekly all hands meetings on them. And I'm happy every time I do /Z and launch a Zoom call. I mean, it's kind of a boring one, but I really like it. We're going to experiment the CTO.ai Slack app. We're excited to try that one out and give it a spin. And then, we're launching the VanHack Slack app probably in the next month or so, maybe a month and a half, where you'll be able to hire developers right within Slack in a few clicks. So, that's hopefully in a few months will be my favorite.
I can't wait for that one. Direct access to 150,000 amazing developers from all around the world, right at Slack, as easy as starting a Zoom invite. Sounds interesting to me.
Yeah, /V VanHack.
Like it.
Love it. That's amazing. Well, where can we find you? You know, Van,
Yeah, vanhack.com.
Yeah.
The virtual background here. It's easy. I'm the only person in the world with my name, so I don't know if you can see my name, Ilya Brotzky. My family actually changed our last name to TZ instead of DS, so it's very unique. Yeah, so it's easy to find me on LinkedIn. Email is just my first name at vanhack.com. Twitter at Ilya Brotzky at VanHack. So at Go VanHack actually. Yeah.
Amazing. Sounds like it's going to be easy to find you. Thank you for coming on, Ilya. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Tristan. Thanks, Kyle. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it for the Op Show.
Another one in the bag. I'm looking forward to seeing that VanHack
The Slack out.
Yeah.
That sounds great.